revolution is of the mind.
Technology will empower our future or run us over. How we choose to think will determine our fate.
Better thoughts, better life. Welcome to Thought Hacking with Scott Mitchell.
Well, welcome. Hey, I want to welcome you to another episode of Thought Hacking. I'm Scott Mitchell, and I am here today with a good friend of mine, actually, an amazing guest. His name is James Whittaker. He is a 3-time award-winning, best-selling author. He's an entrepreneur with some extraordinary businesses under his belt, and he is the host of Win the Day with James Whittaker, a podcast. It's incredible. He's got some amazing guests on there, and he reaches over 2 million people a month with his Win the Day content and programs, and it's pretty phenomenal stuff. So that being said, I will warn you, if once you start listening to him, you might notice he has the wrong accent. I think before he moved here, he came from some kind of like penal colony or something like that. So maybe you can tell us about that a little bit. But anyway, without further ado, James Whittaker.
The land of convicts. Somehow made it to America as well. So life is good now. We overcame big adversity back in the day by being sent to Australia for stealing a loaf of bread back in the day, and we've thrived.
Yeah. Did your background in crime help you when you got to the U.S.? And
that's right.
The podcast career. Yeah. So speaking of that, I've heard your story before, but a lot of these people may not have. And I just want you to share a little bit about how did you get into personal development and come up with this idea of Win the Day? Because you've had quite an extraordinary journey.
Growing up, I think we all want a higher station in life, or just to get a bit clearer in who we are and to try and live with that alignment. And I had a lot of issues in high school in terms of debilitating anxiety because I came from a family where my father was on quite a meteoric trajectory when I was in high school through some of the things that he was doing. And I think as a child, you can't help instinctively compare yourself to those people around you who are doing well, which is a great lesson, right? We should never compare our journey. Like, what am I doing at 15 years old comparing someone at 42 years old who's gone through 35 years of failure before he started all of those different things? And I also had an older brother who was performing very well academically too. So that caused a lot of anxiety issues with me that I didn't understand at the time. So that led to a whole lot of heartache and, just bad decisions along those years, maybe not hanging out with people who were a great fit for me and all of those different things as we try and figure out exactly who we are. And then one day I hit a bit of a rock bottom moment. And that was a moment for me when for the very first time I planted a flag and said, here I am, life, come and get me. Like, no more victim mentality. I'm going to do the complete opposite. I'm basically going to do the reverse, the opposite of everything that I've been doing to try and see how that would work out. Because that was just simply not a good plan. I was just not in a good place. And there was just no way that was going to have a good ending. And I was quite honestly sick of it. And that was a moment for me when I began to consume everything I could find on personal development, peak performance, mindset, resilience, relationships, everything, personal finance, nutrition, fitness. I wanted to know it all. It was probably too wide in terms of the focus that I had there. But that was when I was about 23 years old. That was 17 years ago. So every single day yesterday morning, I'm listening to Jim Rohn on Spotify. Like, I'm constantly reading books, constantly listening to podcasts. And that was really, but that was when it went from like a passion. Something big happened. It was when I know I'm sort of skipping around a little bit here in terms of the story. I'd moved to America at the age of 28, and then I moved to LA at the age of 29. So I did an MBA in Boston, where I was exposed to entrepreneurship for the first time, and that made me realize that if other people can do it, then I can do it too. Then I moved to LA when I was 29 years old. This was in 2013, I believe it was. And a few years after that, I got an opportunity to be involved in a movie about Think and Grow Rich, which obviously the best-selling self-help book of all time by Napoleon Hill, as you know. And I came on board I came on board as executive producer of the movie and author of the book called Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy. And that was when I realized, actually, for the first time in my life, I was 33 years old. It was like for the first time the clouds had parted, and it was like, this is what you need to do for the rest of your life. And there was a passage from that book and from Napoleon Hill's teachings. He talks about the poverty conscience will automatically overtake any mind that is not preoccupied with being success conscious. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, we need a daily, ongoing focus on the success conscious. But that sentence seemed a little bit lengthy and tough to understand for me. So I thought, how does that work? And what does that mean to me? And how can I think about that in my own way? So the way that I think about that is win the day. I was like, if we can make the decision to win, otherwise you've made the decision to lose, the difference between success conscious and poverty conscious, we can make the decision to win, or you've automatically made the decision to lose. That's it. Win the Day. Win the Day podcast was born. Win the Day Accelerator with Success Magazine was born. Win the Day Mastermind was born. And for the rest of my life, as you heard me say the other day, for the rest of my life, I just want to do Win the Day. I just want to help people win the day, and I want to be the best in the world at it. That's my big focus.
Yeah, I love that because I think, there's so many tools and tricks and things we can use, but at the end of the day, it comes down to every day making a decision, every hour making a decision, every minute making a decision. But it really is, it's so easy to lose a day like that. You can just wake up, get in the wrong mindset or ask the wrong questions or tell the wrong stories to yourself. And the next thing you know, you're feeling crappy. You're maybe not acting like your best self. And pretty quick, you're like, wait, it's 5 o'clock or something. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that happens is then all of a sudden we're like, well, it's too late. I've already wasted half the day or whatever. So it's just what it is. And then we give up instead of going, hey, wait, I still got 3 hours left, but that mentality of like, yeah, reconnecting and winning. So tell us about, because you do this and there's so many neat things about the way that you live your life, but when you don't win the day, when you wake up, you don't feel like it. And maybe you had a bad day, even the full day. How do you recover? How do you get back on track when you're midday and you realize, wait a second, I'm not being the best James I can be?
Those moments for me now, it's shifted as a bit. You and I have been on the parenting journey.
Yeah.
When
we should get into that.
Yeah, when you have a kid, everything sort of changes because it helps you prioritize. And there are some times when you're like, hey, I've got big career goals, but hey, I've also got kids and things that need my full attention because obviously nothing's more important than your family. Like if you had to if you had a ring around all of your most important priorities, everything would come down to the smallest ring, which is your family. That's the first thing you need to look after. So my bad days back in the day were more related to things like health, if there was some type of injury or medical condition that I might have been facing, which was a rarity. It would be burnout, things like, which I would later realize, it would be working on things that was not in alignment with who I was and where I wanted to go. And just really not taking care of myself. So the way that I handled it then was really just a matter of time, but also seeking out the right people. And I'm not particularly saying that they're good solutions. That's just what I was doing back in the day. Someone that you met in the last couple of days was Dr. Hooley, who's amazing. And she had spoken to me a few years ago when she works with a lot of high-level entrepreneurs in terms of getting them unstuck. And she said to me at this event, as we do when I'm at events with her, we just sit down with each other, we just gaze into each other's eyes, and I just listen. And a big lesson that she shared was just this idea of resistance. So much of this pain comes from resistance. If we actually stop and observe and even lean into what those feelings are and what they're telling us, rather than needing to capture and hold on and resist to what it is that we're going through, then we're going to find we're a lot more equipped to be able to overcome that situation, and we're not going to reach the depth of that depression and anxiety than we would have previously. That's been a huge lesson and a massive turning point for me. And the way that I handle it now, I mentioned having the kids, who I love more than anything. At the same time, I recognize that the stress that kids put on a marriage, the time it takes away from you being able to follow your own individual ambitions, for people who are very serious about their own career as an individual, or they're so focused on a marriage, you need to stop and really consider what kids are going to do to that situation, especially if two of you work, because it's very, very challenging. So I actually firmly believe that not everyone should have kids. Yeah, you need to have kids to fully experience life, but what that can do in terms of the stress it brings in can be very challenging. And with kids now, the way I handle that, like my life is in such perfect alignment that I don't really have days that are really that bad anymore. Like my lows are nowhere near as low as they used to be. The highs are crazy high. It's almost like I've moved everything up. The lows aren't as low and the highs are actually higher. The plan that I have for it all, every morning I have a very disciplined morning routine. I'm always writing down, I did it this morning, what 3 things am I going to do to make today a win? I always think about that every single day. But if we have a kid that's sick, or a kid that's waking up 4 or 5 times a night, you just take care of it. And a big lesson that I've learned is that you don't need to set a world record every day. You just need to give the best you've got on that day. And that changes your focus on it. If you're in the gym, you're not going to let ego get in the way and do something above your pay grade where you may not have had the energy to do the mobility work and the stretching beforehand to warm up properly, which is going to make it more likely that you get injured. So instead of walking in and saying, you know what, I'm not feeling great, but I have the discipline and this is just who I am, the person that's going to set foot into this gym to do the work that this day requires, based on the energy and how I'm feeling on that day. That's how we focus on consistency. That's how we focus on growth. And that's ultimately how we win.
Yeah, that's beautiful and amazing. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, Dr. Hooley is incredible, and that whole resistance thing you said, I think it's so important because I think when we get off track, that a lot of times is what we do. We're kind of like pushing back against the world or against ourselves, and it creates this tension, and then that becomes overwhelming. We start procrastinating, we start avoiding that psychological tension in our minds.
For sure.
And so there's kind of a beauty in just being able to take a deep breath and let go and be like, okay, that's done. Now what?
It's
Now
the idea of just observing, isn't it? You know,
yeah, she really taught me that too. Just reminded me of that. Just
for sure.
just sitting, letting things sit there, and then all of a sudden they just kind of melt away, and you can focus on the next thing.
For sure. Some of the people that
pretty
I've
cool.
invested in, like I interviewed Rob Dyrdek, who's, was a skateboarder. I actually didn't know much about Rob before I interviewed him. I had to go and do a lot of research. But Rob is a guy who's got, I don't know, like 8 million followers on Instagram. Like he is a massive household name around the world. He's got like 8 television shows. He was one of the world's leading skateboarders and just was able to turn that into so many different things. But he said there was this one guy who lives in La Jolla called Dr. George Pratt, who really helped him just get to that next level in life and business and just create an existence where everything gave him energy. And I thought, wow, I need to go and see this guy as soon as possible. Now, this guy, just out of curiosity, I'm like, I now know the clues of to what made this guy one of the most successful people in the world. What could he do for me? So I booked an appointment, very expensive. I dropped everything to go and do this. And it was amazing. And one of the things that he spoke about, Dr. George Pratt, who went on to give me things like a testimonial for my book, Think and Grow Rich to Legacy, we were able to have a friendship, which I really am grateful for. He said, when you have these different things, and that was during the craziest, most anxious time of my life because I had all of these different business interests in a whole bunch of different countries, hundreds of clients, and it was approaching a wedding day when someone who had come from the background of anxiety that I did, the wedding day was a day that I always feared because my anxiety was always one of those things where it was triggered in a situation where I felt that I couldn't escape from. If you're getting married and you've got 150 people who have flown in from all over the world for your wedding and you've spent tens of thousands of dollars on all of these different things, yet you are in a situation that is clearly the biggest situation that you can't escape from, what's going to happen then? So that was a really interesting one for me and something that even though I had overcome it, it's something that I always feared. And the moment for George Pratt where I saw him, he touched me and he said, what would you rate your anxiousness out of 100? And I said, maybe 70. And he's like, you're basically at 100. And I was like, yes, you're probably right. He could just feel it. And he gave me this analogy of birds, of when you have these thoughts of like anxiety and depression and negative thoughts and all of these different things, because negative self-talk had been a huge weakness of mine for probably 10 years to that point. By far my biggest weakness, just to clarify. He said they're just like birds on the horizon. You observe, you don't need to capture them, just let them fly and then just let them go. And that was a huge lesson in terms of letting go and some of the secrets that had helped people like Rob Dyrdek.
Yeah, it is so profound how the brain works where sometimes you don't have to engage. It's like the opposite of engagement. And you have these thoughts you want to capture and you don't want to forget, but there's so many thoughts that it's like, cool, thanks for sharing. Like, let's watch them fly away or whatever. Yeah, that's a great lesson because it's really powerful and we all get stuck with the not helpful thoughts, right? We all have these things going through us all the time, but it's whether we sit there and play with them and sit on them and, just get immersed in them, or do we let them go?
Exactly. What are you attaching to? Like, you don't need to attach to a negative thought just because it's there.
Yeah, you're not your thoughts. It's a part of how you interact with the universe, but it's actually not who you are.
For sure.
So tell me about, I think one of the things that you are so good at is consistency. And you start your day off every day. How do you get into that place? What's your routine that you use to really get into that zone so you can be the best you in that day and really utilize it?
Probably the most surprising thing about my whole win the day mentality and me as the head of it is that I am
you have to be perfect every day.
Yes,
now.
exactly. I am a horrible morning person. There has not been a single day in 40 years on this planet when I've woken.
I knew there was a reason I liked you.
Literally not one day when I've
either,
woken up and gone, thank you, God, for this beautiful blessing of waking up. I can't wait to get out of bed. Beds are so comfy. We even bought these new bed sheets the other day. They have just made it 10 times harder to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Like, incredible. I love the idea when I wake up, all I want to do is go back to sleep. but I have an alarm that says win the day with a couple of fire emojis. And so I'll allow myself like a minute just to breathe. I don't want to, a lot of people are like just rush out of bed. I don't really rush out of bed, but I don't spend too long, because the longer you sit there, you're losing momentum. So I give myself about a minute to breathe. And then the moment my foot hits the ground, it is on. That's when it's like, cool, system's activated, let's go. And that's when I walk straight. Oh, sorry.
Real quick. So as you do that, what's the identity that you put on yourself? Who are you in that moment? And is there a story you tell yourself or question you ask yourself right in that moment to get you in that immediate, like, boom, let's go?
It's a habit now. Too many people depend on me. I need to be the best I can be. It's actually how it changed like my relationship with alcohol and different things too. Like I used to, I was never a big drinker. Like I never have been, but there's so many things that depend on me and so many people that depend on me. And I'm putting a lot of that stuff on myself too. Like I get the emails. I have clients. I have, you saw it with the event that we were part of. There's a lot of things that depend on me.
Yeah.
If I make decisions like drinking alcohol or staying up too late or watching things that will impact my mindset, where I'm then going to sleep poorly and then going to have less energy, these things just chip away at you. And what I've realized at that next level, there's always levels to this game. At that next level, these people don't have time for any of that stuff. Like it's very rare to see the people at, Dr. Raymond and these different, Dan Martell, these different people, they don't drink, because why would you want to dilute your effectiveness? And I'm not big on absolutes in terms of being like, never do this, never do that. I think it's up to each person to make their decisions. But for me, as I continue to level up the game, I'm always thinking about what can I do to be better so I can better serve the people who depend on me, and how can I lead by example? So the moment my feet hit the ground, it's become a habit for me now. Like the Navy SEALs and people that I've interviewed who are the best trained people on the planet in the highest stakes occupation. Because if they're not on their game that day, they die or they cause their friends to get killed. And that's a horrible thing to have on your conscience, especially when you've got 22 veterans as the statistic who are taking their own lives each day, when in reality there's a lot more, which means there's hundreds of those people who are trying, like they're attempting to take their own lives every single day. So I think about all these different things, but when I ask the Special Forces guys, do they make the decision to win? They don't, because they don't have to. They've spent 20 years in their career as a habit where it's just become who they are. It's process, it's motivation. Their legs just move in that direction of what they need to do. So that's what my legs do now. I've been journaling every day for 780 days. It's just what I do.
I think that's profound too. So what you're saying really is that it's become so much of your identity, you don't even notice it. It just is. That's just who you are.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to consciously become aware of it.
Doesn't matter how
doesn't
matter how I'm feeling. Doesn't matter whether it's raining. It doesn't matter what it is. So it's become totally who I am. So to sort of finish off on that routine.
Yeah.
I step foot on the ground and I walk to the cold shower, and then the cold shower just activates. You're just like, whoa, it like shocks you into waking up. And there hasn't been a single moment I've looked forward to the cold shower. It's like, it's never a good feeling. So a few minutes in the cold shower, never any hot water in there. And then I look at my win the day bracelet, and obviously it says win the day on it. And I recognize that the day is there to be won or lost. And I make the decision to win. And then I go downstairs. And what I've been doing lately, actually, which I don't think I've shared with anyone, eating takes a lot of time, and I don't like to waste time. So I have a handful of walnuts, which when you wake up in the morning and you've got a dry throat, like this is a horrible thing to have first thing in the morning, but it's got a very high fat content. And the fat content then ensures that the caffeine that I'm having for my morning coffee that I have next is actually going to be much smoother rather than like a big spike. So I have a handful of walnuts. I have my coffee about 60 to 90 minutes after I've woken up. I do that in the morning sun in the backyard, where I sit down, I do my journal. What's unique about the last 24 hours? How am I allocating my energy? Then I write down what 3 things am I going to do to make today a win. They're never all related to the same thing. It's always like, I think I put this morning, I want to turn up for your podcast in a good way. I'm interviewing someone else on my podcast. And it's been a big week for me with everything that's going on. So I want to take a moment to breathe and relax and celebrate tonight, just in a quiet way, to sort of acknowledge that. And then I write down what's a lesson, if there is a lesson from the last 24 hours. And then I also put, what do I feel grateful for? Not what am I thinking grateful for? What am I feeling grateful for? And I always exhale with a smile, which knows that I'm into that mode. And I've planted the seed then of what I need to do to win and how I need to show up for that day. And that's it. Every single day, wherever I am in the world, the morning is exactly the same. If I've had 1 hour sleep, if I've had 10 hours sleep, if I'm in Sydney, if I'm in London, if I'm in LA, it's exactly the same routine. And then from there, it's nothing can stop me. Like that is the ultimate foundation for, there's just nothing that can get in my way after there. I don't have bad days or ineffective days anymore. I just don't. And I'm not saying that, I'm not I'm not an ego driven
No, I understand you.
person at
Yeah,
all.
no,
Yeah.
this is great. So a couple things. One is you do this on the weekends as well.
Yep.
So 7 days a week, no matter where in the world you are traveling, that's amazing. So that's a really deep routine.
Yeah.
I also just want to point out and emphasize, I love what you just said about feeling gratitude, because it's one thing to like logically think through things, but a lot of the real power in our minds comes when we fully associate to stuff. So that whole shift from like, here's the things I'm thinking about that I'm grateful for, as opposed to like actually letting yourself feel the experience of gratitude, because it's real then. It matters
sure.
then. You're connected to it. So
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
met Bob Proctor when I interviewed him for Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy, and he handed me a notepad from the Proctor Gallagher Institute, which was the company that he was running with his business partner Sandy Gallagher, and it was a gratitude list, and I still have it at home. But I realized that most people just write down something that they're grateful for. It's like, what are you grateful for? House, health, kids, sunshine. Move on. They never take a moment to actually feel the gratitude. I would much rather you feel gratitude for one thing than write down gratitude for 100 things.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know what I noticed in that too? It's kind of what we were saying a second ago too about observation and detail, because one of the things, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, but one of the things that I find that really helps me connect emotionally to things is observing the details. If you say like, I'm grateful for my health, that's like, meh, it's like cool, but it's not really a thing, right? Until you go,
sure.
hey, wait, I am grateful that, I am able to have these amazing feet that can hold me up every day, or that my ankles are strong enough that they can hold me, or that, like, you get into these really ridiculous details and all of a sudden you're like, wow, like I really do have a ton to be grateful for right now.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm so lucky.
And people need to open their eyes, right? Like if you just go outside, look around, you think you don't have anything to feel gratitude for?
Yeah.
Well, I've had people like Janine Shepherd, who stays with me whenever she comes to LA. She sits in the room that's next to where it sort of overlooks the courtyard at my house where I have my morning coffee and do the journaling thing. She has been through some extremely harrowing things. And the stuff that she talks about is just being here to be able to have like a cup of coffee and she just loves something like that after all of the craziness and just incredible journey that she has been through of dozens of different surgeries and things that she's continuing to deal with. So yeah, if you do not have a method for feeling gratitude, you need to then start that method by creating more awareness of what's around you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. It's fascinating, and you know this well, and I've had this privilege too, is when you meet people who are extraordinary, it's it's universal that they've gone through really tough things. Like, I don't think I've ever met someone that was, I mean, and it may be true for all humans, right? But it's so interesting that one of the key elements of the crucible of becoming the best you can be, or just becoming more aligned with who you are, is hardship and challenge. And I mean, I do want to come back to this routine for a second more, but I did want you to kind of explain, because you've had a chance to interview some pretty extraordinary people, and talk about that for a second.
Seeking discomfort is so important. If you wait until the discomfort hits you and you're not prepared for it and you're not trained for it, then it's going to destroy you. The people, and I was someone who grew up and didn't have that stuff. And a lot of those things destroy me, because it's like I woke up and I'm 14 years old and I'm like, whoa, the world is a big, scary place. So as a parent, I'm very focused. It's a little bit harder now because my kids are 4 and 1. But as they're getting older, being of service to people who have a lot less than you, being aware of people who have a lot less than you, they're the things that I'm focused on. The people I know who struggle with depression the least are actually the ones who have been through the worst, most crazy things, which is interesting. It's the soft people who have had good times that have, in my experience, who seem to struggle the most with the world that we're in today.
You think it's because it's like working out, like you just get mentally out of shape, like emotionally out of shape, because you're not working those emotions, and so as a result, when things do hit you, you're not as in shape. You're not as ready for it.
Yeah, it's like Navy SEAL training. The people who go to BUDS training in Coronado in California, the ones who tap out the first are generally the ones who are the studs, the ones who are amazing triathletes or who are amazing with these different things because they've been told their whole life that it's good. But the ones who have had to fight tooth and nail for every single thing that they have had, it's just nothing for them.
Mm-hmm.
They live in this thing. They're like, cool, that's it. And they don't think so far ahead. They're like,
Yeah.
cool. They're not overthinking the situation. They're like, I just need to take it one day at a time or one event at a time. So that's really important in terms of that building resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have gone through extreme trauma, you need to be able to connect with other people who can help you just unpack some of that emotion and start to develop elements of self-care and gratitude in the midst of some of those things that you're going through. And after that, once that emotion is not as raw, that's the opportunity to be able to say, what is the gift in this? And how have I grown from this? And that's how we can turn these things into resilience and growth rather than being one of those people who go through life with a chip on their shoulder. I see so many people who 50 years old where they're like, my ex-husband, the asshole, or my ex-wife, the asshole. They're just living and, my business partner or my ex-business partner who wronged me 10 years ago. Who cares? Like, get up and move forward. Like that Stephen Covey quote where he talks about your most important work is always in front of you. It is. I mean, that's what we got to do. We got to be forward. My company is actually called Future Forward. I think it's an important thing to do that. I didn't overthink that company name. Actually, I was sitting in the accountant's office, and he's like, "We need a name for your S corp." I'm like, "What is it? Like, what are we going to do?" And he said, "Don't call it Win the Day. It needs to be something else." And I said, "Future Forward." And he said, "All right, let's do it."
That's great. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, I think what's so fascinating to me about that is it, at the end of the day, it's always about the meaning we give to things, right? Like we don't always realize meaning is a choice. Like the event isn't a choice. Like the thing that happens isn't a choice, but it's literally how do we interact with that thing? Where do we place that in our brain? What do we, what does it mean to us? And we get to choose that. And
For sure.
those people who overcome, those are people who find a way to make the meaning something that moves them forward.
Exactly.
you
Like
said. Yeah.
even the idea of having a podcast, you are now, like me with my podcast, we are a student of resilience. We are a student of harrowing stories. It means that if you and I were to walk out the door now and get hit by a truck, we have people that we can lean on. We have examples of people who have been able to overcome incredible things that we can use to inspire us to take that next step. They're not extraordinary people. They're normal people who have been able to take extraordinary action and an extraordinary path through the way that they have approached that resilience.
Yeah. So tell us about, what do you do the night before to win the day?
Good question. And it really does start the night before, and a lot of people sort of miss that. It's a really good question. One of the first things I do is sort of starts when I'm finishing work. I'm thinking about what's left over. Like, what is something that I wanted to tick off that I haven't been able to do? Because the reality is that what are 3 things to do that can make today a win? Sometimes you want to make action and progress on a project that's a lot bigger than what you can do in a given day. It might be a 6-month project, like writing a book. So at the end of the working day, before you turn it in and close your computer, it's thinking about what's sort of outstanding. And then the next morning, you can plug that into one of the 3 things you'll do to win the day. And then before bed, this idea of never going to bed without a request to your subconscious, the Thomas Edison quote, it's so powerful. Every day before I go to bed, I didn't do it last night actually because I was, it had been a big couple of days. But generally every night before I go to sleep, I close my eyes and I think to myself, what is a problem that I would like a solution to? What is an opportunity I would like to attract? Who is a person I would like to be connected with? And I just plant the seed. I'm not looking for the solution. I just plant the seed. And then I close my eyes and my brain can get to work on connecting the universe with those things and making it happen.
That's awesome. Are you able to go to bed around the same time every night, or are you all over the place? You have kids now, so that pretty much self-explanatory.
It's tough with kids, and I've also been in this has been a...
Yeah, you and me both understand this now.
For sure. But this year has also been, I've been working with Success Magazine on some of these other projects. Like we launched the Win the Day Accelerator. That required me to write 60-something thousand words, to do a lot of filming for that. At the same time, I'm running my podcast. I've got a big business venture that I've been planning behind the scenes. I've been organizing events, all of these different things. So I put my kids to bed at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then I work generally about 3 or 4 days a week till probably 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Now, it's not healthy to be looking at a giant computer screen before you go to sleep. So I turn the brightness down. I try and do all of those different things. And it makes me a bit more tired the next day. But that's okay, because I'm in a season right now where it requires me to do a bit of extra hard work, because that means I'm more present with my kids, because I'm not thinking about the stuff that hasn't been done. So that's the way I have sort of managed that process, because when you have kids, there's just less time, and I do not want to contradict my work stuff with my kids stuff. It needs to be separate, because it's not fair on them and it's not fair on my work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting challenge because it does change the game. You can it's much easier to lose the day with the children in terms of your career. I think it's because it's also very easy to get caught up. You don't want to not be around your kids when they're there, so it's very easy to just be present there, but then let the work stuff slip by.
For sure. And it's important actually to have like a minute to sort of pump yourself up, to go from work mode to being in the house. Because if you're just exhausted at the end of the day, as we all are at the end of the workday, and that is the first time that the kids really get to see you and hang out with you, and they get the worst version of you, that's a horrible foundation for your relationship. So taking a moment to focus on some deep breathing and just thinking about what's the energy that you want to bring into the household and you want to bring into the relationships with the most important people in your life, as well as leaving your phone in a different room and on silent. If you're only spending an hour and a half with those kids in that moment, it's much better to have an incredible hour and a half of love and presence than to be bringing in all of that stuff from that you've been working on all day.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. So you go to bed, you wake up, and if you've got, you're in a situation. Well, I guess I wanted to go back to the seasons thing for a second, because I think there's something really special about that. Because sometimes we get caught up and we feel like we're burning out or whatnot. But there is something powerful, this idea that there are times when that's your job is to work really hard, and it's going to be a rough little 6 months or year or whatever, or maybe longer. How do you understand, or how do you structure your life in a bigger context with the long-term stuff you're doing?
I have a very comprehensive success plan template that I use. So every single year I go, and my wife and I, we do that separately, and then we discuss it together. So it talks about what's my purpose. I have like a career purpose, and then I have a personal purpose, and I make sure everything that I'm doing is aligned with its life integration. That alone will change your life. And then I add in my values. So I know that my core values, like if you were to stack everything back up to my 2 core values, I've got a bunch of values, as everyone does, but connection and growth are my 2 ones. You know me, I love helping people. I love connecting with people. I love connecting good people with other good people. It's just something I love, having deep conversations. It's just something that I love to do.
Yeah.
And growth is the other one. I need to be growing. I need to be around people who are growing. I need to help people grow. If I don't have those 2 elements of connection and growth, those 2 values, then there's a huge moral contradiction with me. And that's where things fall out of alignment. That's where I know I'm around people who aren't a great fit for me. And that's when you get a lot of those depressive episodes in my experience. So I have my purpose, career and personal purpose, link them up as much as possible. I have my values, and then I bring them all back to 2 core values so I can make sure I'm living in alignment and I know exactly who are the people I need to hang around and what my responsibility is in those relationships. And then I have, with the success plan, where I think about 8 different categories. There's things in there like family, travel, experiences, financial, career, all of this different stuff. I think about what is something that I want to achieve. And a lot of people do goal setting first, but once we've got purpose and values out of the way, it's the foundation for us to be able to think about what are the markers that I want on the path that prove that I'm living in alignment. Like if I'm really living in alignment and I'm intensely curious about how great I can be from this one extraordinary life I've been given, what are the markers on the path that can show that all of those things are a reality? So that might be things where you can add in metrics, and you shouldn't attach your self-worth to those metrics, but it might be cool things like, I want to have 10,000 subscribers on a YouTube channel, or I want to have this many social media views for the next year, or I want to earn $1 million in a year for a business. You can start to incorporate some of those things. I'm not a materialistic guy. I used to be really resistant to people who were overly materialistic, but I recognize now that for some people, it's just the way that they can feel a little bit of inner validation to help them better serve other people. So I've changed my relationship with that a little bit. I used to, see someone with like Louis Vuitton shoes or whatever, and you're just like, what are you what are you doing? Is there a better use for that money? But that's the way that I think about that. And I always have that success plan open as a tab on my computer at all times. It's always there. I always reflect to it, and every quarter I review it and I think about what are the action items to do for that quarter that are going to make the whole annual success plan come true.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about if someone is out there and they're struggling to get clarity on their purpose. How did you get clarity on your purpose, and what would you recommend to them?
Good question. You don't get clarity on it by staying home doing nothing. You have to get outside. You have to attend events. You have to meet people. You have to have a process of learning about different industries. You have to have a process of learning about how you can add value and what solutions you're naturally interested in. You have to get out there and meet people where you're like, wow, this is my tribe. This is someone that I really connect with. And when you can do that, you start to get a bit more aware of what problems exist and what problems you want to lean into. And as you start learning about those problems, and start writing those things down, then your brain can start looking at different patterns to find out which ones can be linked. So if you can find a problem here that you're passionate about that links up maybe to something else that you're passionate about, like maybe you're interested in nutrition for athletes because you love the NFL or whatever, then that's an example of something that you can start to learn a little bit more about. So starting to do a bit more research on those things, attending events where those elements might be present, and you could get access to some companies that are already doing some cool work in that space. You can think about what is your solution that you want to bring to market for a problem that you want to solve in your unique way, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And you do that over time and your purpose will be revealed to you.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that is a true thing. I think of education as kind of a hierarchy, and the foundation of all education really I think is self-knowledge, and it's something that we're not really formally trained to do. A lot of it just happens on its own, but it's to really explore these things, to go deep. You've got to try, fail, learn. You've got to get out there, like you just said, and I think that's so spot on because you don't know until you do, and then you're like, this feels right or this doesn't feel right, or and you don't have to keep doing that. It continues to evolve and emerge, and I think sometimes that I found for me early in my life, it was don't let perfect get in the way of possible, because I would try to find this perfect way of explaining or understanding what's my purpose in life or what am I trying to do, and then you can waste a lot of time and miss a lot because you're over focusing on like it has to be the perfect thing, and a lot of times it doesn't. Just try something, just give it a shot, and maybe you're gonna be like, nah, I don't like it. So what? Then you learn, you pivot, you keep growing, and but yeah, I think
I love that. Never let
yeah.
perfect get in the way of possible. And what I realized at that epiphany at 33 years old, where it was like, wow, this is what I need to do. I need to be one of those guys not one of those guys. I need to do it in my own way in the personal development space. And I realized that all of the other random ventures and things that I've been involved in, and I have launched products and companies in just about every industry you can think of. I'm not kidding, like damn near everything. And I'm not saying that's a good idea. In fact, I'm saying that's a bad idea. It caused me a lot of stress and a lot of wasted time. But looking back on it, it means I had a lot of experience and lessons that I can then apply in the work that I'm doing today. If you go and see someone who's a course creator and you have a problem, they're going to tell you to create a course. If you go and talk to someone who helps people with podcasts, all they're going to tell you is to go and create a podcast. I am like the architect who has exposure to all of these different areas, who can actually specifically diagnose a problem much better than those people can in a much more comprehensive way, to give them a much more specific course of action that brings in a lot of other elements for a much more comprehensive future that they can create. And I realize, like the Steve Jobs quote, you can never connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back. And it was like when Steve Jobs walked into I believe, if I might be wrong with this, he was at university and he walked into a classroom, just randomly walked in. It wasn't his class, but they were doing a class on fonts. And as a result of that, he said, cool, computers need to have different fonts. And if he never walked into that classroom, there's a good chance that computers may have never had different fonts. And it's so interesting. Like if he just didn't walk into that classroom, and so looking back on it, that was a huge pivotal moment, but no one could have seen it looking forward.
That's why we've got to be paying attention a little bit, right? Because sometimes the things you don't expect are going to be really, really profound. That's also why I feel like it's really important as you go through this journey to capture things, capture your profound thoughts, your profound moments, because you don't know when they're going to show up, and when they do, sometimes it's very easy to like lose them. They're there, and then and so I feel like that's really cool because it's this like serendipity that occurs in life. If you're not listening though, it can just go right by. Or if you don't capture it, you can forget about it, and
Absolutely.
you miss something really special that you can share with others. So yeah.
For sure.
So tell me about, how do you, as you go through winning the day, how do you prioritize things? How do you, what kind of frameworks or methodology do you use personally to help you do the right thing or the most important thing in that moment?
My instinct is always drawn towards doing the easy stuff that I shouldn't be doing with my most high energy. I think that's just human nature.
Yeah.
Our brain is just drawn to those things. It's like, cool, let me check my emails, or let me go and do editing stuff that I should be like, that I know I need to do for my podcast, but that's the stuff I should be doing at like 7:30 at night when I've got nothing left in the tank. So I just think about what are the hours when I have the most high energy. That's generally between sort of 9 a.m. and 12 noon. And I, apart from a few lucky people, I never ever schedule any meetings during those time. You know, that's the time for me where I've got a 3-hour block where I get in there and crush it. If I have that time, I can do an entire day worth of work at such a high frequency rate that it means it doesn't matter what I'm doing for the rest. So that is extremely important to me, and has been one of the biggest transformations in my life. I interviewed people like John Lee Dumas from EO Fire and one of the big lessons from them was just, what is a time that you have the most energy? That cannot be doing things like email, gym, whatever you want to do that's easy, hanging out with friends. It's got to be, what are you doing to move the big rocks of your life forward? Like, what are your massive goals that will actually make everything else fall into place? The big domino that you can just knock down that will knock all the other ones down. It has to be hugely high important, high impact task you need to make progress on. So that's the way that I structure my time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So along that same line, you've written 3 books. And for most people who can't write a book in a week like you do, when they're planning things out, when you're looking at, but you know what's crazy to me is it's such a giant thing, right? But you have to do it piece by piece. So how do you create like artificial urgency in the moment to do the things that are for something that's 6 months or a year away before you're really going to complete the task? How do you bring that to the present?
I actually love writing, and I think that's important to let people know, because there's a lot of people out there who are like, hey, just, go and write your book. And there are some people who are just not very good at writing. There are some people who prefer video content, people who prefer audio, who it's easier for them to be able to talk into an audio thing and get someone else to transcribe, and then that can be the foundations for what they need to work on. I'm someone who loves to write. I have a degree in English and writing, so technically I'm good at it, and I have a passion for it. So writing is something that I need to do. It's a very big strength of mine. So for people who don't have those elements, you've got to be able to bring that into it to make sure you get the project done. Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, who we saw the other day, he is not someone who loves writing. So he brings in people who can help structure all that stuff for him, because the book has to get written, the book has to get released and promoted. So he brings those people in who can take all of his expertise and harness all of the strengths while at the same time taking care of the weaknesses so he doesn't have to do it. And there's so many people who do that. And that's great, because at the end of the day, you need to have the transformation of the readers. It doesn't matter what process you use, you've got to get it done. So I think it's really important to sort of set that expectation for people, because for me, I can do it a lot easier. Then a lesson I learned from my father, who's written 25 best-selling books. Now he's 83 years old. He just had like his 25th book come out the other day. Incredible.
That's amazing.
guy. Yeah. It's so interesting. He always inspires me. Every day he has a target, 600 words getting done, always 600 words down. That's what it is. It doesn't matter whether he's on holiday. It doesn't matter what's going on. It's always 600 words. And he does that first thing in the morning. He does that before anyone else is up. So that's his goal. By the time other people are awake, he's already done his work. And what I've realized with my own writing, like just because I enjoy it and I have a strength on the technical side of it, doesn't mean that what I'm writing is going to be any good. So there was a big mental barrier I had where I was my resistance comes from getting to the computer. If I'm having a writing day, I think about every excuse under the sun as to why I shouldn't go in front of the computer. And what I realized that inevitably, when I go back the next day or a couple of days later to review what I had written, it's always much better than I thought. So it's the goal of being there, just putting words on the page. Words down is the goal. It's not great words down, it's words down. So all I need to do, it's a bit like going to do a fitness class. My goal isn't to go and do an amazing fitness class. My goal is to walk in the door. And because I'm in the door, it's then up to the instructor, who's going to follow the program. She's going to motivate me to do the 45 minutes of work I need to do. So with writing, my goal is not to do 600 amazing words. My goal is to get to the computer and shut off my distractions. And once I'm there, the goal of words down, inevitably when I return to it, it's a lot better than what I thought. And then when I can view it with fresh eyes a couple of weeks later, once I've got 20 600-word day blocks in a row, it's so easy to refine rather than staring at a blank canvas.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a great thought process to kind of crush procrastination, because a lot of that I think comes from this perfectionism. Like, we've got to do it perfect, till you kind of wait and think and overthink about it and get into analysis paralysis, and you just take the pressure off. You're saying,
Yeah,
like,
and that-
just write,
For
write 600 crappy words and see what happens. But then all of a sudden you start writing and they're not crappy.
For sure. And I
yeah.
have clients who use things called the artist way. I've never used that. It's the idea that when you wake up, you just have stream of consciousness, just whatever in your mind, you just put it out. And that just gets you trained into the habit of writing. I write instinctively. Like, my morning journal is about 400 words every single day. Like, I did a 3-month trip backpacking around South and Central America when in 2012. I wrote, I think, 52,000 words on that. Like, I just enjoy writing. It's something that comes naturally. It's how I think things through. It's my process to be able to do the creative output that I want to have.
Yeah, that's really cool. So actually, on that line, you've done now a journal how many days in a row?
I think it's like 787 days in a row.
Tell us about that, because that is, again, this is a consistency thing that you've created, and there's some really profound things in the art of being consistent. How did you do that? How did you make sure you didn't fall off that?
Well, I set a goal for doing 50 consecutive days of the journal. And that, for me, I'm very, very competitive with myself. Not really with other people, unless I need to be. I'm just very, I'm generally a pretty kind-hearted person. I just want to help anyone sort of succeed. But with myself, I'm very intensely competitive, because I just want to be the best I can be and do the best I can do, because of the background I have. And I take that very much as an obligation and a duty to be able to lead by example in helping other people. So I set the goal of 50 consecutive journal entries. And then it happened. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I realized, I stopped cheaping out, and I said, you know what, I'm going to pay the $30 a year or whatever it is for the upgraded version, where I can add whatever images and things that I want to add. And I realized it's an amazing way of being able to capture memories of my kids and cool things that I've been doing. It's another way that everything's backed up and taken care of. And then you reach 100 days. And once you've done any of these different pursuits, you don't want to break the chain. It's exactly the same thing that Jerry Seinfeld did when he was writing comedy. He set up what's called a 100 board, and every single day he would do another cross on the 100 board to show that he had done his work in writing stand-up comedy. And after that, you've got 100 days of writing jokes, and the goal then is not to break the chain. It's not to write amazing comedy. The goal is not to break the chain. So now it's 787 days. I'm not going to break the chain of my daily journal entry.
Right.
And the way that I do that, and how I became so consistent with it in the first place, was because I anchor it with my morning coffee. I always do my morning journal with my morning coffee, sitting outside in the backyard in the same chair in front of the sunshine. I know that when I have the first sip of coffee, that's when I'm doing the journal. Now, are there times that get in the way where I wake up late, or whatever's happened where we've had to leave, or I'm going out for coffee or something like that? I actually set an alarm and an email to myself to be like, do the journal afterwards. So there have been times when I've had to scramble. There have been times when, because of the changing of time zone, the day has not existed. Like if I'm flying to Australia, the day literally, flying from Australia to America, the day literally doesn't exist. You land at the same time as the plane took off. And so that's when I have to put a little note in my journal, like, not possible today to do journal. Right. But that's really it. It's anchoring, discipline, and just not breaking the chain.
What's amazing, I think you've gamified it, is what you've done. You've made it into a game. And once you're there, there's this reverse psychological pressure that is to not do it. Instead of the pressure that builds up to get you to not do it, you've made the pressure so that the pressure in your brain is to keep doing it. Which is actually really a brilliant idea. Yeah.
And I want extraordinary results. Like I have always in my life, since the age of 23, or maybe since a little bit after then, I've always prided myself on being the exception to the rule. When people say it's too hard to do this, I say, cool, I'm going to do it and show you how easy it is. If people are sitting there drinking soft drink or crappy things, I'm like, cool. Well, I'm going to be over here leading by example with the stuff that I'm doing. Like people say a cold shower is too hard. I'm like, cool. I've done it 900 days in a row. And there's millions of people who are a lot tougher than you and I have mutual friends, like long-term Navy SEALs who are
William might have something to say about us
Exactly.
being as tough as him. Yeah.
Exactly. He'd be 1,000 times tougher than me in like every way. But in my domains, I'm focused on leading by example and taking pride in being the exception rather than reverting to comfort like everyone else does. And that's what you got to be. You've got to be the exception to the rule and take pride in going the extra mile rather than being like, hey, cool, I've had a big week today. I'm going to celebrate with drinking alcohol, which then you're more likely to eat crappy food and then you're going to have a bad sleep and then you're going to be less motivated to go and do a gym session. And then you've missed a couple of days and that turns into a week and that turns into a couple of weeks. And before you know it, you wake up 6 months later. You're like, how did I get here? I've got to start all over again.
You know, this makes me think of, I don't know if you remember Zig Ziglar when he used to do all the sales training stuff, but he had this story about how, you know, people are always like, you got to pay the price to get in shape and stuff. And he's like, it turns out that's ridiculous. He's like, what happens is you pay the price for not working out. He's like, you don't pay the price for working out. You start doing it. It becomes a routine. It becomes something you start to connect with and enjoy. And there's no price there. The price is when you don't work out and 3 years later, now you can't do anything because you're out of shape or whatever. And I think of what you were saying about doing this stuff, it's that comfort thing. You know, we always think about like, well, it's comfortable to go watch a TV show or take a break or do these things. But the truth is like, that's not where you're going to get that deeper kind of comfort. The meaningful kind of like comfort comes from when like you're doing the things that are aligned with who you are. And then you feel amazing.
For sure.
And you don't feel amazing when you're, you know, when you're cheating and when you're doing the stuff that just is to self-soothe your brain for that couple of minutes. It's like that instant gratification stuff that makes you feel comfortable, but really it's fake. It's not the comfort. The comfort,
sure.
The true like peace, we should say, maybe the joy, that comes from when you're actually aligned and you're doing it for 700 days or whatever.
Exactly. I wonder if Zig and Jim Rohn got together when, because Jim Rohn's
they
also
had to have back in the day,
exactly.
right?
Jim Rohn had that quote that said, "Pick your pain. It's the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Which pain do you want?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's such a good one."
Yeah, that is a good one. You know, I will say one of the things I think we both have a passion for and really share is the passion of reading and following these people from the past who've done extraordinary things or who've just like, you know, gotten back up and fallen. Like Jim Rohn's a great example. You know, Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill is a great example. But there's these amazing mentors, and they don't have to even be from the time we live in. And a lot of times it's kind of more profound to find people from different eras in history. Like you can get into the Stoics and go all the way back to the Roman Empire and things. And it's there's really something special about being human and going through that kind of hero's journey, like the Joseph Campbell idea of like we're all on this kind of universal journey in a way. It's different for each one of us. Our challenges are different, but there's universal lessons we can learn and we can share and support each other with. And I think that I'd love for you to share a little bit about like just the studying these people from the past, how that's impacted you. Because for me, that's been a game changer. It's really changed my whole life.
Yeah, Jim Rohn was actually my biggest influence. I found Napoleon Hill through Jim Rohn.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the link, and anyone who knows Jim Rohn's history will know that Think and Grow Rich was really his whole jam. That was his thing. He spoke about his mentor Earl Schoaf and these different things, but that was really it. And then Jim Rohn obviously went on to inspire Tony Robbins and all that stuff, like Tony to Jim, to Napoleon to Andrew Carnegie. Like all of these people have been
crazy
inspired.
Yeah, it's so crazy. That one particular line of just human thought is really interesting. It goes back to like Andrew Carnegie hiring Napoleon Hill, you know, getting people like Norman Vincent Peale and others like, and then that leading to people like Jim Rohn, and then that leading to people like Tony Robbins, and just this kind of arc of like personal development thought and how it got started with just somebody saying, hey, wait, my greatest wealth isn't my money, it's my philosophy, it's the things, the experiences I've had, this psychological tools I've gained, and just those are the things when we share that give real like wealth, because that level of wealth creates a different kind of joy than material wealth does. You know,
it's very well said. It was described to me once. I'd never heard this concept before, but a couple of years ago, someone described exactly what you just shared there. It's the concept of the root mentor. Like, who does your mentor go back to, and who do they go back to? And someone else I've noticed, who I was only made aware of in the last couple of years, actually, when I had first heard about the concept of the root mentor, I'm noticing more and more that a lot of the people that I've been connected with lately, you know, they're all Think and Grow Rich fans, they're all Andrew Carnegie fans and all of that. But Buckminster Fuller is someone.
It's a fascinating person.
Yeah, who was a huge influence on a lot of those people.
You know, it's fast. So I always talk about this idea of you don't have to be perfect to contribute. You don't have to be perfect to do amazing things, Because a lot of times I feel like we start talking ourselves out of this story and we start saying, well, I'm not this, so I can't do that. But anytime you're alive, you can do something great. If you've got 5 minutes, you can give someone a compliment. You can think a better thought. But we always tell ourselves these stories that aren't really accurate. And you look at people look at Andrew Carnegie. So there, people can argue about like his days as a steel tycoon and was he perfect during those times and all this. And obviously he wasn't. He was a human being. He made tons of mistakes. But then at the same time, you have a person who then decided to give almost all of his wealth away, created things like Carnegie Mellon and the Carnegie. I mean, all this, even so many things that he did with his wealth, but also that just desire to give away that philosophy. And I think it also tells the story of how like there is nobody perfect. If you look at the amazing people, whoever they are, the people you admire, they're always fallible. They always have faults. They've always made big mistakes. But if they just looked at that and said, well, that's who I am. I screwed up. I did this thing. Then that story would end in a really sad way. Actually, Jim Rohn's the one that taught me this idea of like, you have examples in life and you have warnings in life. And it's like this idea of like, are you going to be an example or are you going to be a warning? But even if you are a warning for a period of time, the thing is, you don't have to stay that way. You can stop being a warning today. You can stop being a warning. You can win today and start with one day and then flip it like you just talked about and create that psychological pressure. So you're going to have a string of amazing win the days until you've won the day for 700 days in a row. And all of a sudden you're not a warning anymore. You're a profound example because you went from being a warning to being an example. Like that's the other side of it is like sometimes when you're down and you've fallen down, you have this ability to change that arc and that makes your story even more powerful, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
and that's there were parts of my story that made it so powerful and enabled. So I actually had an interesting moment, maybe this was about 4 or so years ago, where I was chatting to my mum, who's the biggest supporter of all my work. Shout out to my mum, Geraldine, in Australia. I love her to death. And we were on the phone because we used to have cups of tea together when I was living in Australia. So now we just, anytime I'm in the car by myself, any opportunity I get to give her a call, I always give her a call just to chat and see how she's doing. And she likes just hearing about my crazy life and everything that's going on. And she said to me, you've interviewed all these hundreds of people and you've been busy telling all of their stories. When are you going to tell your own story? She's like, I think some people might be interested in that. And I thought, even after all the successes and different things that I had, I still felt a lot of unworthiness and disconnection from whether or not anyone would even want to hear that story. So a huge growth that I've had in the last few years is recognizing that every single person in the world has an amazing story. You just need the self-belief and a little bit of help in terms of how you tease that out of you and the structure of what that looks like, the emotion, the vulnerability, and that's how you connect with people. And all of us have an obligation to do that so we can better connect with others. And to me, that's a huge part of like the thought hacking work that you're doing is to understand someone else's perspective and for them to understand other people's perspective so we can start to create a little bit of that harmony.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, I say this a lot, but we really do live in a profound time in human history. Like how lucky are we to live today? Like as a human species, we have more power than we've ever had. I mean, we have more understanding of the universe than we've ever had. And yet, because of our basic human psychology, it's very easy for us to get stuck in this fight or flight mode. We get overwhelmed or we get uncertain or we get anxious because of the way we interface with technology and the kind of structure of the modern world. And all of a sudden, we're like trying to become more like rigid. It's not even a conscious thing. We just want to feel safe, and because we want to feel safe or feel comfortable, we're looking for ways to kind of protect ourselves. We become more rigid. We become less flexible. We start to get in these groups, these polarized tribes or whatnot, and then like other people and start and again, it's not because we're bad. It's just because we want to feel safe. And when you can help people like see something from a different perspective, like you do and like I do, it gives you an opportunity to really, I mean, the person that's involved in that, like you and me, we learn, we begin better, become much better at shifting perspectives more fluidly. But whenever you can do that for someone else, all of a sudden, like light bulbs go off. They can start to become, more aligned with their best self, who they really are. They can start to live a deeper, richer, more fulfilling life. But I think most importantly, and where this is all going from my perspective too, is like we need to start better collaborating with each other, because all the big problems we face, it's going to come from people from very different backgrounds, very different belief systems, very different people coming together and being able to collaborate and overcome like these disagreements and things. And if we're all in a place because of our psychology, we're polarizing and pulling away and dehumanizing each other, it becomes harder and harder to collaborate. So I think this is an important, connecting with these amazing people, sharing those stories, but just connecting with everybody at every level and just learn, especially people that are different or disagree or because those things matter and they shape us, and that's how we're going to write a better story for humanity. And that's you and I are authors. Everybody out there, we're authors. We are the authors of the human story. And what we write with our lives and every single day, like whether we win today or not, that echoes through all of humanity. And that's going to determine whether we create some amazing future for our kids and grandkids, or whether this becomes some like slow, or maybe not that slow, devolving into some Black Mirror kind of dystopia or something, right? Like it doesn't have to be that way, but you listen to a lot of people and we tell ourselves that story. Oh man, things are falling apart and this is wrong. But that's the story we're writing in our brains. What if we wrote a different story,
Yeah, I should have done this at the very start, but I want to acknowledge you for all the work that you're doing. You are on this incredible journey and I just love it. It's so inspiring, all the work that you're doing to help people individually, to help people through your podcasts and all the stuff you're doing. So I'm giving you a massive round of applause and I am deeply honored and grateful for your friendship.
Yeah, you too, man. I really appreciate you too. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to me. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're just very privileged because we have the chance to actually literally try to support other people with what we do for a living. And that's such a great gift, and it's really great to meet other teammates on that journey, because there's no one of us by ourselves that can really help, move that needle, but together we can. And it's so important. Yeah.
I think in the online community, there's so many of the sort of rise of that internet marketing community that's all the rah-rah sales and a little bit too bro-y with everything. And to be in a room, to be connected and have relationships with people who actually are good people who just want to make the world a better place. We're far from perfect.
Right.
But just to be around other people like that is just so important, because you can see the level of depth there. And then just as the years progress, we can see how we inspire other people and they inspire other people. And that's why we change the world.
100%. You know what I think, and people should know this if they don't. First of all, you got to check out his podcast. It's fantastic. But also, what I think one of the things you're so good at is just connecting with people and developing those relationships. And I think it's amazing the kind of people you've surrounded yourself with, and you're excellent at finding really genuine, authentic people, and connecting with them and bringing them together. And I appreciate that, because you've actually helped me get to know some pretty amazing people as well, and I do appreciate that deeply. And I think it's a gift that not everybody has. So I really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you. It's easy to connect good people with other good people. So always happy to do it.
There's truth in that, isn't there? Yeah. Well, James, hey, it's been a real pleasure. I'm honored to have you on the show, and keep up the good work. And if you haven't followed this guy, you should. And with that, I just want to say, look, it doesn't matter if you've made mistakes or if you're not perfect. Just get out there and do something good for the next 5 minutes. Just do something good today, and prep yourself so you can win the day tomorrow.
Thought hacking.
We live in a profound time.